Hello, hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about Throne and Liberty. I'm just going to give my thoughts, my opinions on the game, and just kind of what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling about it. It's been a little bit now. I've got easily well over 70 plus hours on the game. Probably baby numbers in comparison to some other people that have just been going absolutely insane on this game from both a whale standpoint and a time standpoint. But overall, my initial kind of just peeking around and seeing what people are kind of saying on the game, it's a little strange because I feel like some people are forcing themselves to really enjoy this game and really like the game because they came from another game that may or may not have been, not necessarily great. Especially, for me specifically, I'm a BDO player and we're all kind of BDO refugees. Especially if you're here from this channel, you're a BDO refugee just like myself, and we're kind of just looking for something to occupy our time. And I think TNL fills that role heavily, but I think some people are genuinely forcing themselves to love the game when I don't think that that's their actual opinion. I think that is just something that it's kind of that situation where you just finished watching, binge watching an anime, and then you're like, damn, that was a really good one, and then it only had like 20 episodes and you wish it was longer, and then you try and find another one that fills that gap in the heart that you just like, I just want more of this. I want more of this right now. I need that. And I feel like TNL's kind of doing that very heavily. And I don't know that anybody's going to be honest with themselves and say that, but for me, I'm gonna be honest about it, and that's kind of how I feel. So with that being said, let's kind of just talk about some of the positive stuffs. The first thing that I just kind of want to break into is the ambitious world design. I think that's probably the biggest thing here, which TNL is great at this because they've done this seamless open world with no loading screens, which is a complete game changer for immersion, where most MMOs kind of have some form of load screen, some form of way to kind of obscure a load screen. And for Throne and Liberty specifically, they have found a way to just kind of instantaneously teleport you to a dungeon, from across the map, town to town, whatever you want to call it. They have found a way to literally just get to the point and you don't really have any downtime. And this is just impressive on a technical standpoint because console specifically has always had probably loading issues for the most part, and that's to have that seamless experience on a console and to also get that experience on PC too. It kind of just begs the question as to why the hell are load screens still a thing? But that's a conversation for another day. The other side of things is that there's like a dynamic weather system that affects gameplay as well, like altering skills and unlocking new areas, which is insane. That's not new per se, it's not groundbreaking or innovation, but it's just nice to see. And I think that's a pretty fresh new, like not new concept, but just a refreshing concept that's kind of not really been super popular in a lot of other games, and seeing it here is kind of nice. Another thing that I would like to point out that I think is a great thing is that they have somehow blended PvP and PvE together. This has been a huge thing for Throne and Liberty because they have leaned very heavily into the play with friends kind of situation, which is something that a lot of BDO players like myself have been looking for a while now, where there's actually a reason to kind of like have friends, join a guild, so on and so forth. There are some pros and cons to this in my personal opinion. I think maybe Throne of Liberty may have leaned too heavily into this, thus kind of alienating the solo player experience. But for so far, I've been kind of only playing with a couple people, not doing any large scale PvP or any thing like that. But I wouldn't say that my solo player experience has been stifled too heavily by this, so it's not like a deal breaker. But I could see like later down the line it could possibly be an issue, but it could be easily remedied by just joining a guild. But some people enjoy just being by themselves, doing the whole lone wolf play style, so this is sort of kind of a preferential thing. But in general, this PvP PvE focus, like having world bosses being PvP oriented, and then you go up into a giant ball Zerg fight, which that again, another pro and con, right? You join a guild and then you're fighting another guild, and it's kind of just this Zerg battle of 50v50 or whatever the numbers are. It's a very large scale oriented fight that's incredibly interesting to watch. I will say some of the effects probably need to be tuned down, especially for console. I know on PC somebody had mentioned to me that you can turn off effects on PC. On console, I don't believe that is an option, but if we could make that an option, that would be great, because it's very hard to follow what's going on with all those effects on. Even from just a content creation standpoint, trying to upload video footage of large, Zerg fights, that can be very disorienting to watch and not really, great for the viewer if they have no clue what's happening. Not to say that watching a Giga Zerg is like content or anything like that, because some people may enjoy that and some people may not, but for the most part, when I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I have no idea what's going on. I just can't see anything. It's just fireballs left and right, and it just kind of looks like a mess of skills everywhere.
And that's the most broken skill in the game. Every user just got a million people that just flash wave. It's a gigantic AoE that takes out like a quarter of your health.
Yeah, like this literally, like, so I'm just looking at this from like a streamer point of view, right, and a content creator. Like, imagine streaming this to people, like 500 people, and then it's just like, dude, what's happening? Like, I can't see what's going on. Like, I just see fireballs. I see a bunch of tombstones, a bunch of guild names.
Fireballs and tornadoes, bro.
Let me zoom in a little bit. This is probably better.
Moving on to the next thing, cross-platform play. This is actually super refreshing because a lot of games are usually kind of like one cycle type situation where you're stuck here on console or you're stuck on PC, or there's no intermingling of the sorts, which this being full crossplay and it not being the worst case scenario, that feels really, really good. I enjoy the idea of being able to play on PC and console, and then, if you have friends on cross platforms, this is no holds barred. You can kind of just do whatever. There's obvious limitations to console, and then there's obvious disadvantages and advantages, so just keep that in mind. But just having cross platform will ultimately lead to more of a longevity with the game, and I think that's probably the best option, especially for an MMO. MMOs just should be cross platform regardless, because it's about creating a massive multiplayer experience, and the only way you're gonna be able to do that is if you have cross-platform capabilities that make sense. And the last thing I kind of just want to mention is NCSoft's expertise. This is probably something that nobody's really thinking about a lot, but you gotta think about this. NCSoft has a legacy of creating renowned MMORPGs. Like, they've been in the game for a long time. Like Lineage, Guild Wars, like, these are successful titles. I'm just saying, and they kind of know what they're doing. Though I will say some mistakes have been made with TNL, and we'll talk about that in a second. Just don't underestimate NCSoft. I really think that they actually have a lot going for them, and right now it might be a little rough at the start, but I think giving this game time, it can 100% be a household name, just like Guild Wars and Lineage. Like, for real, this is huge. Don't underestimate these guys. All right, now let's talk about some concerns here, okay? So my first one is the potential monetization worries. I gotta be honest, it's a Korean MMO. We know how this goes. We know how it is. NCSoft games have in the past leaned heavily into pay to win or microtransaction models, particularly in the Lineage games. This has raised concern among a lot of people, and I think that the concern is needed, but I wouldn't say it's so far gone that it's like, well, we should not touch this game. I have yet to put really any money into this game. I think I put $5 in for the leveling pass, and that was kind of it. And I thought that was worth it. I got pretty good value for that, in my opinion, which felt nice. So I wouldn't say so far at the moment with the launch, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going for it when it comes to pay to win, but I could see why that there are concerns that maybe somewhere down the line, Throne and Liberty might follow a similar path, which could harm the game's appeal, especially in the Western markets where players are really, really sensitive to pay to win mechanics. So that's just something to think about. The next thing, which is sort of kind of a preference thing, but for me, it is a problem. So the combat system, I gotta be honest, my early impressions kind of suggest that the combat might feel too automated, and it's like a lack of depth to it, right? Like, it's not super in-depth. I know, I'm gonna say it, and everybody's been saying it. It's not BDO's combat. Okay, we got it out of the way, but just, it's got some weird feel to it. It's like the targeting can be a little strange. It's not perfect, and it's kind of wonky. I wish that it was a bit more polished, and I think with time this could potentially be a bigger issue, or it could be, a bigger thing that makes it actually better if they polish it up. But there are some limitations with the combat system, especially when you're on console, and targeting can be a really, really annoying issue. There are some settings that you can do to alleviate some of the issues, but not all of the issues. And then I've heard some worries that players are worried that this is not going to be a skill-based type situation, and that it's kind of just you press 2 buttons, you CC somebody, and then you just blow them up. A lot of people right now are thoroughly complaining about the greatsword. It is a massive, and I mean a massive weapon that does a shit ton of single target damage, and it's one of the probably the most meta weapon currently that is pretty much ran in every single build. And that could also be a problem in itself, having kind of a lack of variety in builds. It's kind of like great sword and then insert other weapon, and that's kind of how it is. Usually it's like great sword, dagger, or the great sword, sword and shield, vice versa. It's just pretty much variations of great sword with other things. And like I said, that can kind of be a little boring, knowing that pretty much everybody is going to have a great sword that has the potential to one-shot you. And then it's kind of hard to balance this around trying to get different weapons out there and developing different weapons, or even switching different weapons, because it takes a lot of resources to swap around weapon to weapon. So if you kind of picked it early on and then they nerf it, and then, well, how are you gonna swap it around, right? It's kind of like, I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with this system, but we'll see how they tackle this. But I think that it could be an issue. But in general, the fact that action combat enthusiasts like myself may find this a little disappointing if it doesn't live up to the standards, and just for the way that it is. It's tab targeting at the end of the day, so you kind of have to just take it with a grain of salt, but it's fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. I still actively play World of Warcraft to this day, so if I'm still playing that, I can't really give too much shit to Throne and Liberty, but I will say that they can do better. Some other things that I would like to mention is sort of the dungeon system. I think that this is a very flawed system. There's a ton of issues that I think that they need to address with the dungeon system for the most part, especially when it comes to loot distribution. I think that most dungeons kind of do have a little bit of loot for everybody, but obviously some dungeons have loots for specific class roles like tank, healer, DPS, etc. Whereas DPS is kind of widely in every dungeon for the most part, but certain weapons are particularly in certain dungeons, and those dungeons may not have loot for other players or other player roles. So it's kind of hard to find healers and tanks for those said dungeons, and that's kind of an issue. I think that needs to be addressed. Another thing that I personally don't really like about the dungeon system is that it is tied to a currency. I think that's a really bad idea. And the reason it's a bad idea is because, one, your players need to learn those mechanics. That's a big thing. They need to understand your mechanics of the dungeon. And mind you, console specifically hasn't had a whole lot of just games that require you to do mechanics like this. This is a lot of coordination. This is a lot of time and patience learning these mechanics. I think with time, this issue will dissipate and it won't be that big of an issue. However, at the moment, this is kind of annoying because people are not patient at all. And I'm not talking about the people wanting to learn. I'm talking about the people that have already learned the dungeon and they're not willing to sit around and let somebody else learn. Jesus, this is a rough group. Oh my, he wants to kick people. I don't want to kick him, dude. I don't want to kick him. It's not fair. They should. It's their first time here. Like, just teach them the mechanic. I want you guys to know, like, it's currently 8 o'clock in the morning, and this guy is already on one. Holy shit. Okay, he did it. Woo! Oh my. Wait, what happened? Wait, what? I wasn't paying attention. So they go to the other side. Okay, he goes to this side. He clicks it. We should be okay. Click it. Okay, now they run. That's tough. Okay, well, that's a wipe. There's no way we win that. All right, let's see what they do. Anybody get stuck? Okay, he's waiting. Okay, get the sheep. Nice. This. They went the wrong way. Only one person's getting the sheep. Ah, it was too long. They went the wrong way. They all need to go the one. And he stood in the thing. Why? Well, he left the party. Mission accomplished, I guess. Oh no, they're dead. We win this though. It's okay. I was too slow. Hey, we did it. It's okay. We'll take it. I deserve the sword for that. Malevolent staff. Jesus Christ. I did. I went and taught a whole group how to do the dungeon, hard carried, and it gave me a fucking staff. Yeah. My favorite. Pretty much in every dungeon I go to, I have no issue teaching anybody the mechanics of the dungeon. Me and Franco do this all the time. We've ran so many dungeons and we've basically mastered every single dungeon to a T, and we can do it flawlessly ourselves. However, there are players that do not have that same experience and we have to teach them, and we're okay with doing that. But we have been a part of groups where we've witnessed people just straight up kick other players just for not understanding the mechanics and just not even giving them a chance, and outright saying like, it's not my job to teach you, you should do research yourself and learn it. And that's fair. That is a fair statement. However, you're kind of a dick. So I'm just saying it's a little weird, right? And I think Throne and Liberty doesn't necessarily teach you these mechanics early on, because if you do dungeons and if you watch any tutorial anywhere that's talking about a leveling guide, they'll pretty much tell you don't do dungeons early on because it is a waste of the currency. But early on, the dungeons kind of teach you how to actually do some of the mechanics that are later in the real dungeons at level 50. So it's kind of, whenever they hit level 50 and they have to start doing these dungeons, they're just punched in the face with all these mechanics that they now have to learn. And then the other players that are not willing to sit there and be patient and let them learn, they're just getting kicked from groups over and over and over again in hopes that they're getting another player that maybe knows the mechanics. And mind you, console players, like, these guys are chimps. I'm gonna be honest with you. As a console player, I can wholeheartedly say this: these guys are chimps. They have no patience. Zero patience. They are not going to sit here and want to teach people. Some might that are actual adults, but like, I guarantee you there are a lot of players that do not have the time or want to take the time to teach somebody, and they want to get the dungeon over with and move on to the next. So this is definitely an issue to a degree, and I think that they need to revamp the currency. I think it shouldn't take 300. If you're that adamant on keeping the currency, you should dumb it down to 50 to 100, and that be the how much it takes to open the chest, because you want to give them time to keep running the dungeon to learn the mechanic, right? If you only give them so many credits to run the dungeon and then they run out, they have no incentive to keep running the dungeon. So we need to, one, fix the distribution of the loot evenly, so that way healers can queue up for every dungeon, or change it to where instead of it being loot inside the dungeon, you can use pieces of the dungeon and then you can craft the loot. Add that as well, which I am aware of the salvation coins. Like, that is a thing. You could theoretically do that as well. But people look at that and they're like, well, I'd just rather get the raw drop. So they're just going for the raw drop, and then they're doing like Duke Magna 46 times instead of just running the other dungeon. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I think just time blocking the dungeon is not a good idea. I think that when they need to learn the mechanics, you need to give players ample time early on, especially early on. They need to learn this stuff, because people are not going to want to teach others. It's just not something that they're interested in. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Throne and Liberty. Overall, I think the game is relatively sound and positive, but it's not the craziest thing ever. And I don't think that people should be saying that this is like a game of the year. This is the most insane MMO to walk this earth. And it's good. It is just good. But I would not go crazy over it. It is just okay. It's got some tweaks and some tunings that need to be fixed, and then they have some things that they should adjust just for the sake of, you know, accessibility, because time gating stuff, I get it. There has to be a way for them to slow content so that way progression doesn't get overwhelmed and then they have to keep, you know, pleasing the players. Time gating stuff is a great way for developers to kind of halt the players' progression from burning themselves out, and it keeps them coming back. It's a really solid system. However, it has certain issues when it comes to certain content. You shouldn't time gate dungeons. You should time gate other things. Dungeons should not be time gated, because that's going to be majority of your content. Bosses, killing bosses, understanding mechanics, that is a big part of your game, and you have time gated learning those mechanics, and that is a problem to me. As an avid dungeon runner and a dungeon tank, People need to learn these mechanics. This is not the system. This is not the way that should be, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you guys are enjoying Throne and Liberty, let me know what you guys like about it, what you don't like about it. I'm kind of interested to see what everybody else's opinion is. But yeah, that's mine. So I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.